from your book says silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. This is from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Can you talk about that and what that meant to you and why you included it in your book?
Well, it's complicity. If we don't speak, we are complicit, and we are in effect allowing the evil. If we don't talk, and if we don't encourage, and we don't tell the truth, then we ourselves are part of the problem. We're not part of the solution.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers. I'm your host, Harriette Cole. As always, honored to have you here with me today for what promises to be a very special and important conversation. You know, when I come upon people whose stories are so rich and who are willing to share from the heart, I know that this is the right place for them to be, because here at Dreamleapers, we are looking to inspire people to access their dreams, to activate their dreams, no matter what their experiences, challenges may be. And as we all know, that's not always easy. So let me tell you who our guest is today. Joining us is artist, author, and activist Mary Fisher, whose voice changed the course of public health history. Mary Fisher made history in 1992 at the Republican National Convention when she delivered an unforgettable speech called A Whisper of AIDS, addressing her peers about a disease that threatened the lives of many, even the unsuspecting, during a time when no one wanted to understand. This very speech altered the trajectory of AIDS, of HIV and AIDS advocacy and awareness, and was ranked as one of the 100 best American speeches of the 20th century by the Oxford Press. That's really impressive. Mary Fisher's courage didn't begin or end there. She is a fierce humanitarian who has spent decades transforming pain into purpose and silence into storytelling. Her journey has carried her through the halls of political power to the front lines of the global AIDS crisis. She has advised presidents, founded foundations, and created art that speaks across languages and borders. As a United Nations Special Representative for AIDS, she brought dignity and attention to the lives of women and children living with HIV around the world. And through it all, she kept telling the truth, whether on canvas, in sculpture, or on the page. She is the author of 7 books, and in her latest memoir, Uneasy Silence, Mary opens up about life behind the spotlight, the grief, the resilience, and the radical power of telling your own story. Her previous books, including Messenger, are testaments to the belief that even in our darkest moments, we can still find light. Mary Fisher is a survivor, a storyteller, a world changer, and today she is here to tell us how she found strength in vulnerability and how each of us can do the same. Please join me in welcoming Mary Fisher.
Harriette, my goodness, thank you. I don't just hope to live up to that.
Well, you already have.
The introduction. Oh my goodness. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to say you already have because I've been reading your work, and you know, a lot of people are not as honest as you are, Mary. And you know, honesty these days seems like a luxury, right? It's tough.
It is tough.
Can you talk about what happened when you were growing up? Where did that come from, this fierce honesty that you have? Because it takes a lot of courage to really step into the truth and be willing to say it.
I'm not sure it happened when I was younger. I was one that was taught that women, you know, girls should be quiet.
Yes.
Should be good, should be quiet. And but I always was concerned about the other. I just didn't know how to get there sometimes. And I did different work all my life, but once I became HIV positive, it took on a whole new purpose. And if when you're facing your own mortality, you seem to either do something that is in your heart, which is basically me trying to tell the truth, um, and protect our children. And in those days, that's exactly what I needed to do, because I only had 4 to 5 years to live.
Right. Because you were diagnosed in 1991, is that right?
Correct.
So this is just a few years after AIDS was discovered, HIV was discovered and named, right? It was in the mid 80s that I think it was named. Is that right? And so I want to go back for a second, because I read in your book about how you were taught that the role of girls and women was to be quiet. And you talk a lot in your book about, this sort of the machinations of being silence versus speaking out. And your book really does go deeply into that. This notion of who women are and the role that we are supposed to play and how we are supposed to be was something that, as you describe it, it was a burden.
Yes, probably a burden, but I think it's also generational. I believe that at some point, at least in the community that I grew up in, I think a lot of it was generational. And sorry to say that I didn't see things. I wasn't taught things that I've learned since I grew up. I mean, I was sent to college to, become an MRS and have babies, so I think that we do a disservice. And that's what I found once I became positive, and I could talk about being positive and talking about that. I wanted to prevent the stigma for my children. I just felt so strongly that if we don't give the right education, the honest, truthful education to our children, we're doing a disservice. And that includes everything that goes on with HIV. It's one of the STDs, one of the infections that you can't get rid of. There is no cure. And young people sometimes, if they drink or they do whatever, their judgment fails them. And then they can't make good decisions. So they need that kind of information. And that's what I was trying to do, is to help people understand that if it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone.
Well, and the fact that you are a woman, you are a white woman who contracted HIV at a time when the stigma was, this is a gay disease. That moniker was put on HIV, and then suddenly everybody could legitimately hate gay people because, this scourge was upon them. And for a white woman to get HIV meant, wait a minute, how's that possible? And for you to talk about it, and you mentioned that because you had 2 young children at the time, you just described, you felt like you had to protect your children and others. But so many people back then, Mary, I remember I was in college when HIV first was recognized. And back then I was a model. So I was very much involved with a lot of people in the creative communities, and many of them were gay. And suddenly I remember at fashion shows, people would be there, and then the next time I would see them, they lost 40 pounds, and the next time they were gone. People did not talk about it. Even when you could see them with the lesions and whatever, people did not talk about it. You write about this in your book. In obituaries, it would say people died of cancer, even if it was one of the carcinomas associated with HIV. I call it bravery. The fact that you decided, and you write about this, your family didn't want you to say anything. Your dad was very prominent, did not want you to say anything. Be quiet, girl. And you were so not quiet. Can you talk about that? If you remember, what happened within you to break free of the people who are telling you be quiet, and to be able not just speak, but I mean, you spoke to Diane Sawyer, you spoke on the floor of the Republican National Convention. You didn't just speak, you spoke.
I think maybe it was a gift, maybe it was something that struck me. I don't know, but I do remember that when I first was diagnosed, I met a woman. Her name was Sally Fisher, no relation. And she had been doing years of work. Now, I had worked with people with AIDS, women with AIDS in Florida, because I had been working on substance abuse. And, that was what I did. And Sally said, we've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for you. And I said, but, I'm not Magic Johnson. He had just been diagnosed as well. And I'm a mother in the suburbs with 2 kids. It's not
right.
And she said, no. And I understood what I didn't really understand what she was saying, but I said, all right, I'm willing to take a little trip to find out and do some, I don't know how to explain this, Harriette, but I would do just some research, really, and with people in at those times. We didn't have social media, we didn't have anything like that, but doctors and newspaper people and people in the community that were willing to talk to me. And my question to them was, with what you know about me, can I make a difference? Could I help? I mean, you don't need to do something that is maybe it wouldn't even be helpful, but everyone said yes. I mean, I can tell you a quick story about Mathilde Krim, who was a doctor and head of AMFAR, and she told me that she had been speaking in, I think it was Denver, or anyway, it was in the West, she was in New York at this time. And she said she had been speaking to OBGYN doctors and people that were taking care of women and that kind of thing. So she went through this whole thing about, AIDS and HIV and what she gave them every information. And then at the end of it, it was like quiet. And she said, does anybody have a question? And they said, no hands were raised. And she said, I don't understand. You have no questions about this. This is a new, it's not a new disease, but it's also affecting women. And a man raised his hand, obviously a doctor from somewhere. And he said, we don't deal with women like that. And when she told me that story, I mean, and that was one of many stories that I've heard.
And women like that meant women with HIV.
Women with HIV, or who would have, and I thought, whew, okay. I mean, and I looked at her and she was like, we do need you. And I was like, okay. Wow. It's times like that where you say, okay, well, okay. I mean, you just, okay. And then
it's understandable that look, in our culture, it takes somebody to represent a cause for people to understand how to rally around it, whether that's good or bad. That's what happens. I mean, like Rosa Parks was not the first person who refused to give up her seat, but she was chosen because she was strong enough and representative of someone that people could say, okay, I understand. And, there was a woman that you mentioned in your book who just recently passed away, who I worked at Essence when the AIDS crisis was escalating, and Hydea Broadbent, you mentioned her in your book. And we did stories about her and other Black women who came, who were afflicted with AIDS, HIV, and then AIDS, and the stigma that, first of all, the fact that we were right about it, people were mad at us at first. You shouldn't do that. You can't say that. They must be IV drug users. Why would women get it? There's something they did that they shouldn't have done. It's their fault. It's their fault. And Hydea lived until, I think maybe she passed away last year. She lived for a very long time. So just like you, there were a couple of Black women who ended up being, this light shining on them so that it could be shown. And I'm sure, as you know, Black women in HIV, even to this day, the numbers are astounding.
I do know that. And that was one of the reasons that I spoke often as I could in the southern states, because also my doctor is at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and we had lots of kinds of interactions with all of the clinics, because I think that what women didn't understand, if I said, if it can happen to me, it can happen to you, but I think that women didn't understand that that meant anyone who has, sex with anyone.
Right.
And there was, I don't know what the expressions are now, because now I'm older, but I think there was a lot of on the down low kind of stuff, with men who were just experimenting or whatever, and then they bring it home, and then that's, I don't know if that's how I don't know, but I think that it was hard to help women understand that it could be them. And believe me, Harriette, I spoke to so many Black women, and I spoke in front of so many Black women and churches, Black churches, and gave sermons and talked and talked and talked and loved them, because all I could do was to embrace them and say, if you can even just open this up a little bit in your head, just, be careful. Take care of you.
So very important. Hey, everybody, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are having a very important conversation with Mary Fisher, who has written a number of books. Her current book, which is really probing a space that I think is important for us to consider, is called Uneasy Silence. And she's talking to us today about her journey and kind of what that means. And so you talk a lot in your book about the importance of words, but also the importance of silence. Sometimes it's powerful in a positive way. Sometimes it's not in a positive way, especially because you got HIV, you contracted HIV as a pretty young woman, and having to go back and forth about what are you going to say and what are you not going to say. How do you find the words to express what you are feeling in ways that people will listen to you?
I don't know. I don't know how that happens. I mean, I always say a little prayer before I speak. And I always say, please let me say this the way they can hear it. I don't know. I was not taught to speak. That is not one of my things. I used to produce television. I used to do, I worked for a president in the White House. I mean, I'm a behind the scenes person.
Right.
So this was not what I knew how to do. I mean, I knew how to do it, but I didn't do it. Right. And so this was something new for me. And I work with a wonderful man who helps me write speeches and do that. But we've given thousands of speeches in all kinds of places, and which is kind of remarkable, because it's when you stop to think about it. I've given sermons in every religion, and it seems to work. But it's let me tell you also, I was invited in 93, I think it was 93, to give the sermon that was at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Alabama. And it was the anniversary of the bombing. Pardon me?
The 4 little girls, right?
Oh yeah. And I was like, okay, you're white, you're Jewish, you can do this, Yes, of course. And I made friends there, and I was one with the woman, and who's still my friend, although I don't see her who told me stories about the hosing and told me stories about these little girls, because she's been there ever since that. And I was so humbled, and maybe it's that kind of thing that can let people know that if I can do it, then you can do it too. You can stand up and talk about what is important to you, and you can have the strength to do that, because our voices are necessary, especially now, about everything almost, but at least certainly about this.
You back to this sense of transparency and honesty, the depth of honesty that I see in your book. You talk about something that I'm very curious about, which is how a white woman, or white people in general, especially privileged white people, come to an understanding of racism and the struggles that people who don't look like you have, and there's a part in your book where you talk about how the native people of this country were just ravaged. And then you go on to talk about what has occurred in the Black community. And today, I want you to talk about this from the context of what you have learned and what you see today. And from this perspective, we now live in a country where DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is considered a curse word. I can tell you from my own business, where I work with everybody, but because I'm a Black woman, suddenly everything I do is DEI. And so that means certain projects don't come anymore because it's a bad word. What is your understanding? What have you learned about racism and its impact on people now?
Oh, Harriette, I have to tell you that Isabel Wilkerson changed my life, and Cast, and that movie, Origin,
yeah.
Ava DuVernay. I mean, I don't think it's that my family purposely didn't talk to me about it, but it was being in Detroit as a 16-year-old, or however old I was, in the riots in Detroit. It was something that didn't concern me. That's what I was told. But somewhere inside of me, I knew it did concern me, but I didn't understand it. And I know that I listened to people who talk about how their parents took them to protests and stuff like that. And I listened to John Lewis, and I'm like, I just didn't get that in. I didn't get that information. I didn't get that level of education. And I feel bad about that. And I feel that I've missed so much that I could have done maybe more of. And well, of course, we all say that kind of thing, but I think that Africa helped me.
Because you did a lot of travel and outreach.
Well, when I went to Africa, like the first time, I went as part of one of those groups that goes from the White House, and they go to 5 countries and it was an AIDS trip, and I was part of the group, and so here we were sitting. The group from Washington, and then the people from Africa are sitting. Uganda was the first stop, and sitting on the other side of the room. And then the Ugandans would sing, and then they would talk about the problems. And this was before they had medication, so everybody was dying. We're talking about dying, right. And so they had clinics, but they had clinics to help people with the side effects that happen, and the hives and the stomach things. And, so they were giving out cream. I mean, it was not a medication. Okay. So I was sitting there, and I was uncomfortable. I was so uncomfortable because they're telling all these people about what it's like to have this disease. And I'm going, nah. So I asked if I could talk with them. Rather, let me go on that side.
Right.
Because I felt like I had finally found my family. It was weird in that strange way that you're connected.
Mhm.
And they could not believe that I was a white woman that had AIDS, because they didn't think white people got AIDS.
Right.
And they also didn't understand why I was talking about it and how I was talking about it. And I thought, okay, this is good. I can help here and we can become friends. And that's really how it happened. I mean, it was more of I was being not let into so many schools here and being able to talk. So I felt like these were my family. This is where I can help. And I felt really privileged to be able to be with them. And I learned so much from them as well in all these countries about everything you're talking about. Racism, no food. People don't get food. The children don't get food. They walk for water. The water's not clean. Everything, and it did change my life.
I'm
I mean,
sure. As a Black woman traveling to a number of these places, I realized the privilege. I remember being I'm on the board of a charity that's headquartered in India, and watching people recently walking on dirt roads with no shoes, and I realized how many shoes I have, and I was embarrassed that I have so many shoes.
right.
Because, I should send all of my shoes to folks, because we don't realize the level of privilege that we have in this country. So I want to turn
I
things.
also worked in India.
Yeah, so
I know. Oh, it not just the shoes, but just the basic embarrassing places where there's this huge big house and then next door there's this hovel, and you just go, why are we not caring about the other? Why are we not paying
no
attention?
toilets. We've helped the charity that I'm on the board of is called Prasad. We've helped thousands of families build toilets so that the women in particular don't have to go out into the forest, they call it, and possibly be raped or hurt.
Absolutely. Oh, that's wonderful.
It's quite amazing. So I want to turn the page for a moment, and you write very plainly and boldly about what's happening in our political system at the top levels today. And you describe January 6th, which hopefully will go down in history forever as being this horrible experience, but really a brainwashing experience. And this is why I wanted to address it, because you mentioned a few moments ago about how nobody would think that a white woman would get AIDS because white people don't get AIDS. And even before that, you mentioned what you hadn't learned, things that you didn't learn when you were growing up about our history, and especially the history of race. Well, one of the things that I noticed in looking at during this election cycle leading up to this presidential election for 47 was many people in Republican or conservative parts of our country who were asked about January 6th. And do you realize what happened and what that meant? And that this was led by the person who's now president. They said, we didn't see that video. We don't know what you're talking about. There is a huge swath of this country where the people never saw the footage of how the Capitol was broken into, how people were hurt, how the police were completely ignored. Their news didn't show this. And so it wasn't just, we believe him anyway. It was, we don't know what you're talking about. That's very scary.
It's very scary. It's very scary to me too. I mean, I personally,
this is where we get speechless, the silence of your book, right? Oh, right. What do I say?
I mean, you get speechless because what do you do about that? And that's why you do stand up. And that's why you do talk. And that's why, I mean, I'm in LA right now, and that same person is trying to say this is an insurrection, and it's really people going out for a walk. And I know that there's a lot of immigration issues, and I'm not going to. We don't need to get into all of that, but that was an insurrection. That was against our government. The police officers were killed and maimed, and it doesn't seem like
this at the deepest level.
Exactly. In our capital. It's not like on the streets of
as the vote was being acknowledged to be real.
To stop that vote. I mean, it's just, and I don't know. I mean, certainly there have been lawsuits and Dominion won and all of those kinds of things happened that put some of the information forward.
Right.
But I think that we have this division. Well, we all know that's very divisive, but we have a division of people in what they watch and how they hear and how they get their news. So isn't it imperative for those of us who can and have a voice to tell people that this is important?
One would think. Hey guys, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are talking with Mary Fisher. We are talking the truth here. And she's written a book. Her most recent book is called Uneasy Silence. And she goes for it. There you go. She goes for it. She's letting us understand, a lot of things about speaking and not speaking and the power in that. You have a lot of great quotes in your book. And it made me think of something that was said to me. I had the privilege of working with Earl Graves, who's the publisher of Black Enterprise magazine, for a year. He was on tour with his book, and I was producing special events for him. And he had worked for Robert Kennedy. He was on the front lines working for Robert Kennedy. He was an advanced man, like you were an advanced man. And he said that his job was to make sure everything was set, that it was safe, that everything was the way it was supposed to be. And he learned from Kennedy that sometimes you have to stand in harm's way in order to stand up for what is right. And he talked to me about that. And just to really point out, it is our responsibility as human beings to stand up for what is true, to not be quiet when to be quiet is a crime. And you talk about that. So one quote I want to share and then have you talk about from your book says, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. This is from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Can you talk about that and what that meant to you and why you included it in your book?
Well, it's complicity. If we don't speak, we are complicit. And we are, in effect, allowing the evil. If we don't talk, and if we don't encourage, and we don't tell the truth, then we ourselves are part of the problem. We're not part of the solution. And I feel sometimes if I could quote someone who's has wonderful quotes, people will understand it better, and I think that it's just powerful when you think about it. It's powerful, and it's a way of helping people to say, yeah, I can do this too. I mean, it isn't easy, but this is our time to speak out. This is our war kind of thing, and we need to speak out, because if we're in a place where truth is always not always heard or not always appreciated, and I do believe that people need to somehow understand that it really is all about love, and it's about loving each other, and it's about loving whoever we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you too. I mean, I've watched. I grew up in a Republican home. I
Mm-hmm.
did this. I worked for a Republican president. I spoke at the Republican convention, but my party went somewhere else.
You did.
This is not. I can't talk to the people that are there now. Of course, they don't want to talk to me either. But
I'm sure they don't.
but I don't. It's like amazing to me. It's amazing to me, and I don't know what we do about what you just said about the fact that these people don't know and didn't see the insurrection.
And there's so much information available. I often think that, on the one hand, information is everywhere, but you need some guidance to get to information. And so if you are relying on one source, or that rabbit hole with algorithms even online is going to take you to more and more things that support whatever theory you have decided you believe in. And it's tragic. It goes back to this uneasy silence, which is the name of your book. Sometimes you don't know what to say. Sometimes it's hard to find words because people are not paying attention. They do not believe you. They pigeonhole, oh, she's different. She's not really, or whatever it is. And it's so tough. All right, turning the page again. There's so many things that you've written about. One of them is very important to me at this moment because I've very recently, a month ago, lost my mother.
I did hear that, and I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you. She was 95 years old.
Wow.
She had a wonderful life, and we have wonderful memories. So, but it still hurts when you, especially losing your mother. But you have a section in your book where you talk about grief. And I think in America, we don't talk about grief enough. We don't learn what to do, how to be as people are transitioning. It's just not discussed. And so one thing that I'm doing, Mary, and I've been doing it for probably a year, in the year that my mother was ill, I talk about her all the time anyway, because there are so many lessons, but I talk very openly about this process of her leaving and what that was like. But you have a quote that I want to read that's from David Kessler. And he says, grief is optional in this lifetime. You don't have to experience grief, but you can only avoid it by avoiding love. Love and grief are inextricably intertwined. So powerful. So powerful.
He's amazing. He is a grief expert, and he has been doing this for years. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, they work together, and he taught me, because I actually thought I was dying because I was so depressed and I didn't understand. I come out of COVID and all the things, and my mother passed away, and I was down, very down, and I thought maybe I was dying. And he explained to me that I wasn't really depressed, but I wasn't allowing myself to grieve. And grieving is about love. For as much grief as you have, that's as much love as you have. And he's remarkable. I would love for you to be talking to him at some point. He's just an amazing.
Make that introduction. I would love to.
I will make that introduction. He is just remarkable, and it makes it okay somehow, because we all have our own levels and patterns, and it's not like it's going to be over. It's never over. It really isn't ever over.
Mm-hmm.
There are good things and bad things in your relationships with anybody, even your mom. I can vouch for that, but I loved her. I loved her, like I took care of her. I was there. I mean, her whole life. So I don't know that you part that or can put it in a box in a cubby somewhere. It just doesn't work. So loving and what you're doing and talking and feeling.
Yeah. It's so important. My older sister said, there are three of us, I'm in the middle. My older sister Susan said that a couple months ago, what Mama is doing now is teaching us how to die with dignity, which she did. She taught us all the time. And in my work, I'm always teaching something that I've learned, imparting some knowledge. One of the things you start your book when you're talking about this book happened after the experiences that you had during the pandemic, and just that the pandemic was such a bad thing in so many ways because of the isolation, and human beings need each other. It's a fact. Like, babies who aren't held in the hospital die often if you don't have that human connection. And at the same time, and I've learned this through my spiritual practice, and you write about this in your book, you have to find love for yourself on the inside, or it's not going to work. Nobody can give it to you. You cannot become happy because somebody gave it to you. Somebody
Right.
did it for you. And so, but this is such an odd juxtaposition. We need people, but we have to get it from ourselves. And so it's like, oh, how do we do these things? In your experience, especially given the fact that, you thought you had a death sentence and then you're here. So there were many years with HIV, and then you had a fight with cancer. This sense of a death sentence was there over time. How do you take that sense of mortality and somehow find the strength to love yourself, to do the work that you do? Because I'm sure there's a push-pull in there.
Because I'm human, there's a push-pull. But I think that because maybe age has helped a little bit here, and maybe, I think I talked about it. It's a little bit harder to walk up the stairs these days, but it's a lot easier to tell the truth. And I feel, this may sound strange, but I do feel that when I am feeling low or not quite there, that I have to take care of the other. So, like, I'm on the board of Project Angel Food in California, and take care of other people and to help them.
What is that? Tell us what that is.
Project Angel Food is an organization that provides medically tailored meals. It started, in fact, David Kessler was one of and Marianne Williamson was one of the founders of it in the 1989 or it was right when all this was happening. So it did start with, feeding people with HIV who couldn't get out or whatever. But now it's medically tailored meals for people who have kidney problems, liver problems, diabetes, cancer, and it's like remarkable. And so the meals are prepared, but they're medically tailored, and some of the people have could stop the meals because they learned how to eat, and they're not in the hospital. It's like, this is good, but this is taking care of people that can't take care of themselves, or they're alone. And I find this, I go to the kitchen and I can make meals, and they tell you what to do, but you put them on together, and then you just know that you're helping somebody.
That's beautiful.
And that for me now, besides being a grandmother of 3 children, it's been life-saving for me, which is, I know that, but it has been.
It totally makes sense. Let me remind folks, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We're coming close to the end of this amazing conversation. And I just want you to know, this book her latest memoir, Uneasy Silence, is a powerful book that will speak to everyone. We're talking with Mary Fisher about her book and so much more. Mary, I interviewed someone recently, someone I've known for many, many years, who wrote a book about his experience of almost taking his life. Mm-hmm. And why he didn't is because as he was about to drive off of a bridge, someone was calling him and repeatedly, and he finally picked up the phone because it was so much calling, and the person was saying, I'm about to take my life. And he turned and went to help him, and that is why he's still here. You write very directly about suicide and the thoughts of suicide, and there are so many people that we don't know in our world right now. If people were to tell the truth, probably all of us know people who have contemplated suicide or might be contemplating it now. And I would just like for you to address what can we do? What can we say to people to help them if they are in this tender place of not thinking that their life is worth it?
Getting them to talk to you is a big deal. Mm-hmm. He answered that phone. He did. I think that was, something.
Oh yeah.
and so I do believe it's helping them see that they can be helpful to the other, or it's small things. You can't tell somebody not to do something that they want to do. You can just love them. Mm-hmm. You can listen. You can hear what they have to say. You don't have to judge. And I think that's part of it. I wish I had all the answers, Harriette. I don't have all the answers.
Well, none of us has all the answers, but my mother, but one of her many pearls of wisdom, she would tell us, when you're feeling down, when you're feeling upset, when you're feeling sad, do something for somebody else.
Exactly. That's so great. Oh, that's so great.
Service. She's like, if you live a life of service, then you will have humility because you're not so worried about it. How fabulous am I? Am I good enough? Am I not good enough? If you're serving others, then humility can take over and ground you.
Absolutely.
This was a huge lesson that she would teach us all, remind us all the time, and especially if you're feeling down. And we have times when we're feeling down. Oh, everyone, as you say, we're human. And so therefore this happens. But back to the pandemic, one of the many great things that came out of that horrible situation is how we are communicating right now. People didn't know how to use apps and electronic things to talk to each other and to see each other over the internet. It existed, but Zoom was, what's that? And then suddenly it was the way that people could connect to each other. And, I have another broadcast that I do every Monday that's called Dreamleapers Inspiration. And we unpack a quote. That's why I love you have so many quotes in your book. We unpack a quote and often have a meditation. And I started it during the pandemic because fantastic. I was at home feeling like, I'm alone. And other people were, I said, let's just start talking to each other. And you wrote this book out of all that was occurring for you during that time. So what is your message to folks as we leave this conversation? What is your message to folks? What is the most important thing you want them to know now?
I want them to know that they can and if possible to connect with community, to share with community, to stay with their thoughts and to believe their gut, and then to speak about it and to speak about how they feel. I mean, with love. We don't have to be, we just have to tell the truth. And I think telling the truth is really important. But I do think that it's about creating community, staying within community, and maybe some of those people you can talk to them and tell them about, there might be another station you could watch. I don't know. But I do believe that we have that ability. And I think that I wanted people to know that it doesn't matter who you are in your own community. you can talk, and in your own community, you can make a difference by standing up.
That's a beautiful thing. And my one last question as we go, how do you deal with fear today?
Serve others. Serve others. Take a deep breath. And I guess pray. I pray, but I think being with others helps the fear. Talking about it helps the fear.
I agree. Mary Fisher, thank you so much. Thank you for all of the great work that you have been doing over all these years, and for your courage and your honesty and your transparency. We appreciate you.
Harriette, this has been just an amazing conversation. I feel like I've made a friend.
You have.
We have to do something about that.
I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. I hope that you have benefited from this conversation as much as I have. Mary Fisher is the author of many books, as I shared with you, and the speech, which you can read, A Whisper of AIDS, from the 1992 Republican National Convention, and her latest memoir, Uneasy Silence. Have a read. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.